welcome everyone to this AGS lecture about this year's AGS Study Tour to the Maritime Alps. It was led by David Richter and Tom Freeth, and they're going to host the chat. So here we go. I'll hand you straight over.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the talk. I'm David.
And I'm Tom. And it's going to be a bit of a kind of, I don't know, Anton Deck or some of the Laurel and Hardy, maybe a little bit back and forth presentation from us.
I'll take the latter. So I was delighted to be joined by Tom and a group of members of the AGS earlier in the year for our inaugural AGS study tour in this part of the world, at least, which was billed as an exploration of the Maritime Alps. I wanted to include this photo. This is the Mont Chiron, which is the mountain that our participants were staying at the foot of, about 1,000 meters down to the sunny side of the slope there. But it gives you a bit of an idea of what we have in this part of the world. We're right down in the south of France. We're mountainous, but we're also very Mediterranean. And one of the themes of the tour that we were trying to bring out was looking at how these very different biomes interact in this area. Tom, do you want to jump it on?
Sorry. There we go.
There we go. So I'll briefly say who I am. I'm David. My wife, Beth Marshall, was going to be joining us, but unfortunately has been drawn away with other commitments. We are both based down in the Alpes Maritimes, hence the theme of the tour. And we came out here about 5 years ago to set up a small botanic garden, which whose logo you can see in the top left of the screen there, the Jardin Botanique de la Flore des Alpes Maritimes, which is focused exclusively on the wild flora of this department of France. And you can see us there. We do events. We have a nursery. We have a small garden which is under development. We develop school gardens. That's Beth in the bottom right there doing one of her sessions. Both myself and Beth have a reasonably long now background in horticulture, and we were lucky enough to meet Tom when we were all students together, going back a bit now at Kew.
Yeah, and my name's Tom Freeth. I'm an Alpine Garden Society trustee, along with Beth. We'll talk a little bit more about the wider motivation for how we put this study tour together and what made it different. We will then we're going to proceed through in a chronological fashion, and David's going to introduce some of the resources that we put together to teach. This was a study tour, right? It wasn't just to come and see the plants. We wanted people who maybe ordinarily didn't get the opportunity to do this, to learn field skills, to learn expedition skills. So we'll share a little bit about that. Don't worry, there will be liberal sprinklings of the wonderful plants that we saw there. We got very lucky with the timing. We've got a lot of people to thank for this. We had some generous funding, and we'll take some questions from the floor at the end. I'd like to start off a little bit talking about why we did this. So in my day-to-day role at Kew, I get the opportunity to work in the field. I wouldn't say a lot. These images are somewhat misleading. It's probably 2% to 98% kind of field work to admin, but still get to do it. And what we're conscious of is there's not actually a pathway to learn these skills for a lot of people that are in horticulture professionally. We're also conscious that the Alpine Garden Society in the 80s and 90s used to plan and execute proper expeditions where material was collected and brought into cultivation in the UK. The ACE expedition, the Alpine Garden Society in China expedition, for example, had noteworthy figures from the society who also held positions in professional horticulture in the UK, and they were able to deliver really, really high quality outcomes from that. And that was the motivation for doing this. Obviously, David and Beth and I are friends. We have a bit of a Kew kind of expatriate club on the south coast of France, which is lovely. But the idea was, can we do something that's in line with Alpine Garden Society's charitable objectives, where we can source some funding to make it more affordable for people. And then can we teach them things like field identification, seed collecting, seed cleaning? So that was the concept. I'll hand back to David, who tell you a little bit more about the region.
Thanks, Tom. So highlighted on this map, you can see in the bottom, sorry, not bottom, in the southeast corner there, the Alpes Maritime, one of the many départements of France. This map is actually a map of the predominant vegetation types. I thought this would be quite illustrative because if you were a botanist and you were planning your trip to France, try and think where you'd go. I mean, there's vast swathes of low-level plains, mid-altitude hills. The Central Massif starts to look a bit interesting. There's that interesting fringe down there in the Pyrenees. But then when you get over to the Alpes Maritime, you can see just from the map, this is going to be an interesting area to visit. You've got the orange color there, which is the strictly Mediterranean biome, which comes into the southern area of the department, and of course you've got the southern tip of the Alps, which comes right down to sea level. I mean, we've got peaks of over 3,000 meters within about 40 kilometers of the Mediterranean Sea here. So it's interesting in the wider context of the biogeography of the region. If we jump on, Tom, please. So this is a bit of apologies for those who don't speak French. I'll explain this. It's a graphic just showing some of the figures of the floristic diversity here. So we have between 3,200 and 3,400 native wild species. There's a long history of cultivation and historic gardens along the coast. If you factor in that aspect of it, we're talking many thousands of species of plants which are readily accessible here. The area there highlighted in the lighter yellowy color is the Préalpes Regional Park, and Coyolière, which was the base for our tour, is situated right at the heart of it. In terms of the area here, if you're looking for a comparison with the UK, it's probably about the size of Devon and Cornwall combined, and we're talking about double the number of wild species you get in the entirety of the UK in this very small space. As you can see, we've got about 60% of the French flora here, and according to the source, about 27% of the flora of Europe. I'm not sure how accurate that is. On the alpine side of things, there's, I believe, around 4,000 strictly alpine species throughout the Alpine Arc, and about 2,100 of those are present in this department. So right at the very, very southern tip of the entire Alpine Arc, you're getting over 50% of the alpine species. And you're also getting one of I believe the only center of endemism in the Western Alps. So a lot of plants, around 120 alpine endemics that you're only going to find right down here in the southern tip. So there's good reason, if you're an alpine enthusiast, to come and visit this part of the world.
One of the things we thought it would be good to do to look at developing skills, we used an online platform called iNaturalist, where we set up a project and we encouraged our participants to obviously taking photos is always great when you're on a tour, but record it on this platform as part of this project. And you can see in 5 days, the team submitted over 130 observations and witnessed over 100 species. Um, uh, there were quite a few butterfly enthusiasts in the group, which is what the red bar on the species bit at the side. But it is now contributing to research actually, where these images are identified on this platform by 2/3 of the community. They then get marked research grade, and they are placed into open source, globally available biological data sets for use in research and conservation.
A brief slide showing a few of the endemics of the Alpes Maritimes. We have very many of these. I wanted to show a few that were not included in the actual tour itself. It was really hard to work out when would be the best time to visit, because with great altitudinal difference that you get within the department, obviously at some point lower down things are completely finished when they're only really getting started higher up. But what can I say? We've got Erodium rhodii in the center there, which is a very narrow endemic. It grows on a hill about 15 kilometers from where I currently am, and it literally grows on this one hill. Its parent population moved south a long time ago, leaving this relictual population. Similar sort of story for the Acanthophrasum frutescens, which we'll talk about in a second. The Fritillaria montana used to be Fritillaria cossolensis, Cossol after the Plateau de Cossol, which is just across the valley from me now. Again, a very, very narrow endemic. Part of the reason for these very small and very fragmented distributions of the endemics is the topography of the area. Tom, if we can jump, please. Okay. Go ahead.
And there's one famous AGS linked endemic of the region. And David had teased that there was a possibility we might be able to see Saxifrage florulenta in flower, which would have been a first for me. And it motivated the group, to hear about the history with the society. And I think I might have hammed it up a little bit by saying they would be the size of dinner plates. But you'll have to wait and see till later in the tour as to whether that would come to pass. But yeah, paleo endemic, David, is that right? No, tertiary relict endemic.
Same thing, yeah. Something it's been around for we're talking in the millions of years, clinging onto the high granite peaks of the Mercantor. And really, if you come to this region, it's the plant to go and see.
I think probably doesn't get counted in the Alpes Maritimes endemics because it goes across the border into Italy, but it is, ecologically it's an endemic, isn't it? It's a couple of massifs in that part.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I've hinted already how important altitude is to the botanical diversity of this region. This is a diagram that you'll come across in almost any book about this area, and many of you would have who are familiar with putting alpines in their context will be aware of these vegetation bands that you tend to get. They're very distinct here. The unique element with the Alpes Maritimes is that we have the full range. So we do have alpine peaks, and then we also go right down to what's known the firmer Mediterranean, where frost hardly ever occurs. Superimposed on that graphic are the visits that we had throughout the week. The blue and the red give an indication of the substrate, which is alongside altitude, one of the key factors for the variation in the diversity of the plants here. And I wanted to put this graphic in because an element of the tour was the challenge that Tom set, not just to airdrop people into the most interesting, fascinating parts, but to actually go on a bit of a journey each day and to plan an itinerary that involved the transitions, especially of altitude, climbing up mountains, and trying to sensitize the people who are on the tour to where those transitions are, the species that change, what's particularly sensitive to aspect, what's particularly sensitive to altitude, and all of the clues that gives us about how these plants can best be cultivated. Oh, and a quick graphic. So this is a representation of all of the places we visited. Nice doesn't really factor in apart from people arrive there by plane. The other red pin is Grolier, where we were based. And then you can see over to the east, we had a jaunt up to the Mercantour Massif, high altitude acidic massif with its fascinating flora. We made a few visits to lower altitude but interesting places within the Prealps, and then getting a bit further north on the northwest up to the high calcareous peaks as well. So the very first day, everybody coordinated very nicely and arrived at convenient times at Nice Airport. And it was baking hot, as I remember, mid-30s heat down.
Hot. It was so hot.
So I planned in a possible bit of light refreshment on the way up, which was heading through the Gorge de Loup, which we had to drive through in order to get up to Grolier. If we can run on, please, Tom. So this is a vegetation map of the Gorge de Loup. This area is particularly renowned for its gorges. There's 3 or 4 main large rivers which come down from the Alps to the sea, and as they pass through areas of largely limestone, they've cut very deep gorges, and Clou, which is a local name for a pass between 2 valleys, which tend to be very steep-sided, very enclosed, have a very particular microclimate, and home to very many of the endemics, often varying from gorge to gorge. So you can go along the course of a river and you'll find in the lower gorges a completely different flora to what you find at a higher gorge. And likewise, you go 20 kilometers to the west, the substrate changes, the plants change. In this particular gorge, the Gorge de Loup, there was one treat, which is a plant called Acantha praesum frutescens. You might be able to make out on that map, there's some wiggly lines which are purple and black, which are a unique community of plants which you only find in the Alpes Maritimes, and it is they all exist on very sheer limestone cliffs, high aerial humidity, basically no soil, baking hot during this when the sun's on them, and yeah, a very, very difficult growing conditions, but then a very unique community of plants that have adapted to this.
So going up the valley, I mean, it was so hot. David's fairly well adapted to the climate there. I am not. So a dip in the river and an ice cream were much needed. We got to see tons and tons and tons of Adiantum capillus veneris that many of us may grow at home. There wasn't a great amount of plant life here, as I may have mentioned once or twice. It was very hot, so half of the population of Nice were also in the river at the point. But we did see this very nice conehead praying mantis in the middle, and then a species which you'll see much of through these photos. Homo sapiens, I believe, var alpina on this group. But we trudged forward past the many millions of people in the river who'd also had the same idea as us. And behold, our first niche plant of the trip. As David said, it used to be a bolota. It's going over a little bit here, so I'm going to bring that image back from the beginning, which is one of David's images. I've never seen this in cultivation. I'd like to try it. It is disgracefully rare, and the site that David described there is one of the meccas in Europe for rock climbing. So a key threat to this incredibly diverse and very, very localized is the ropes from the belay swinging down. However, we found this in good number, and there were seeds around. And I wonder whether in the right place, in the right person's garden, maybe it might make a good plant. I would also like to point out David's being quite modest. All of the visuals that he's putting through on this were the actual things from the resources that he put together to teaching materials. You're going to see lots of images of David attempting to teach the group, and varying degrees of enthusiasm expressed on the face. But the visualizations, all the drawings, the text are lifted directly from the resource pack that we gave to the participants. So with an ice cream in hand, we wandered on to Grey Olière, didn't we? And woke up fresh and ready to go for proper day one.
Yeah, I'll just say a quick word. We were able to rent a townhouse and a small apartment. We had 9 participants. Tom and myself made 11. So just on the logistics, we were sharing accommodation, self-catering. I think it worked well. I think everybody seemed to get on well, and people cooked together, and it made for a nice sort of collegiate atmosphere throughout the tour. So the first day, we started off at the eastern extremity of that itinerary. We were ultimately heading for the Crête de la Bernarde, which rises up to about 1,900 meters. And on the way, we passed by the Clou de Saint-Aubin, which you can see on the right-hand side there. Just to say again, in case anyone missed it, a clou is a very narrow enclosed gorge, usually where a river slips from one valley to another. In the middle there, this is us. It's a small single track road, which was interesting with us hopping out of the way when trucks or anything came through, but it's the only way really to get up close and see some of the plants that live on these limestone cliffs. You can see at the top left there's Phytuma carmelii. There is an endemic Phytuma that we were searching for, Villacii, which has a slightly different leaves. Everything almost gone over. We were only at about 800 meters here, so this is the season's far advanced at this altitude by the time we get around to July. And then we progressed on. The picture of the car park there is the low point of this fantastic wide sort of perched valley that you drive up to. You climb up to about 1,500 meters, excuse me, and then you're presented with these beautiful, gently sloping hills which rise up to crêtes, to ridges on either side. The higher one is the Bernard. You can see we made it to the top there. That's us underneath the beacon which marks the high point. You might also see the dark clouds gathering in the background. There were claps of thunder in the air, so we didn't hang around for too long underneath the metal pyramid. But the idea really was, as we were going up, to have a look at these transitions between the vegetation types. So we went from a moist, almost pseudo subalpine meadow down at the base of the valley, and then you're climbing up through xeric grassland with things like Halictotrichum sempervirens, and then we were getting into the higher vegetation, which is it's a rocky environment. It's a thing which is quite cutely called Hedgehog Heath that we have here, which is a very rocky environment full of low-growing cushion-forming plants, things like Anthillis montana and Globularia cordifolia, lots of succulents. And Tom will show you a few of our finds from the day.
So in typical AGS tour style, when you see a plant and if there's no cars coming, you can, it's the rules, isn't it? You can park the van. So we did. So this is on the way up to the areas David's just explored, which is where we found our first plant that, there's always a bit of anticipation, right? Are we going to be in for the right time? Is it going to be flowering? Are we going to see anything interesting? And so, yeah, the first thing that we saw where it was a bit of a relief, like, this is quite cool, was Lilium pomponium, one of the endemics that David mentioned at the beginning, just hanging on. Few still in full flower, most were over. This is a sort of mid-elevation endemic there. It was right on the edge of the road, easy to find by pine forest. Not actually far from where we were based, where Beth and David used to live and where the garden is. Those eagle-eyed amongst you will have noticed that the logo for the garden, which David and Beth ran, JBAM, or the Jardin Alpin, Jardin Botanique des Alpes Maritimes. I'm going to get slaughtered for that. There we go. I put it there. So that is the logo of the garden that they've set up. A really, really nice one. Up on the top of the summit of Bernard, classic Campanula cochlearifolia with Emily in the background there, and taking nice pictures, and also I think papping me whilst we were doing it, assuming the position. So cochlearifolia, many of us will grow nice thing, great big carpets of it up there. But there was also this quite curious one which I'd not come across before, Stenocodon, which was on scree and rubble, and looked super heat tolerant. It was also kind of growing up through the shrubby scrub, whereas the Campanula cochlearifolia was right on the bluff. You can see on the bottom, what would it be? It might be bottom right to you, wouldn't it? These exposed bits of stone on top of the slope, the Campanula cochlearifolia was in there. David mentioned right at the beginning the interface between the Mediterranean flora and the subalpine alpine flora here. And this was the best example for me. Some of you might grow Molopaspermum peloponnesiacum, giant, very impressive umbellifer. Imagine it's a great Dixter plant. So it's called Peloponnesiacum, right? So it doesn't mean it's from the Peloponnese, but it probably means that the specimens that was used to describe it were from the Peloponnese. So you've got this giant Mediterranean umbellifer growing next to Campanula cochlearifolia, Centaurea uniflora, sempervivums. I always love the way that the net around the base of Centaurea uniflora is super common, but really, really pretty side on like that. And through the iNaturalist project that we did here, one of the community identifiers actually said, we think you found an unusual hybrid there. I can't remember the parentage, but we also had our first kind of spot the bot thing there. So the small dots going down the ridge there are our tour group, who we managed to bring them back with the same number that we left with, but we did get fairly spread out at points when the enthusiasm takes hold. So there was also tons and tons of lavender growing on the hill. It was so odd, and really, really nice. You've got the fragrant kind of thyme and the lavender, and then you kind of turn around and you've got Edelweiss, which and really, really good ones as well. I never know whether or not this is in full flower or not. Edelweiss obviously being the classic, if of any, maybe up there with the trumpet gentian of in the battle of the classic alpine flowers. Always been interesting to me is it's composite. It's in the Asteraceae family, but it's a composite. It's a daisy head of daisy heads. And this is something, it's a phenomenon that appears to only occur in the alpine compositae. It is an alpine adaptation. And Edelweiss is the best known manifestation of that. But yeah, never ever thought I would see Edelweiss growing so low down and next to other fairly Mediterranean flora. And that was it for day one. On to day two.
On to day two, I would just quickly say something, because we're talking about alpine plants in a non-alpine context, and some of the areas around, well, some of the areas we visited and many of the areas around where I live have been classified as a thing called pseudo-alpine, where they're asylvatic, not necessarily because of the altitude preventing trees growing, but we have extended summer drought. We have a lot of grazing in the area by sheep and goats. And so it's allowed plants which inhabit far higher altitudes to come down to, as I say, within a handful of kilometers of the Mediterranean coast. So it also leads to this strange juxtaposition, which really throws you when you first get here, of finding plants which you're familiar with, complete to something next time which seems completely foreign. Right, day two, we must get a jog on. This was a long, action-packed day. I wanted to take people up to our ultimate destination, the Aiguille de Pelin. And en route, we passed through the Gorge de Dalouis. Can we jump, please, Tom? This is maybe part of the reason people were, when you see them in photos, are straying so far and wide, was a hallmark of the tour, or what a hallmark I wanted to introduce to the tour, would be to have people very well briefed about what they were likely to find in areas, and then set them free to go and explore and see if they can find things which we expect to be there, and any surprises that maybe we didn't. So every day we had note sheets. This day's focus was looking at the Crashulaceae of the region and some of the scree communities. Here we are in the Gorge de Dalouis. This is a very strange fragment of a substrate which crops up here and there throughout the department. It's a very ancient mudstone. It doesn't really form soil. It crumbles under the slightest touch. Still, strangely, bears the marks of when it was, I forget the term, but when it became rock. You see, you can see almost how waves have lapped across it. You can see the sort of dimples and bumps that you see in shallow water. Really inhospitable environment, but fantastic for succulents. And then later on in the day, we started the climb up to the Aiguille de Pelin. That's another little mid-tour briefing. I think I was about halfway through that book, hence the looks of boredom and frustration. And can we just climb the mountain, David? Which you can read on people's faces. And here we are. This was our ultimate destination. We only had about a kilometer's trek, but it was a vertical kilometer almost. We had to climb a narrow subalpine valley, and then at the top, we were about 2,200 meters, 2,300 meters, and there's a vast amphitheater of the most spectacular craggy peaks, and a vast field, a vast expanse of scree.
This is our second Where's Wally, or Spot the Bot, as David was calling it. So that black dot in the middle there is Will, and then the car, like David said,
Not quite that far away, but it felt like it on the way up, didn't it?
super deceptive. And I'm a fairly experienced hiker. I think I proclaimed as I got to the top of those trees there, I don't think I've ever been this sweaty in my life. It was a steep trek, but wow, what a reward. The dot in the middle over there is Nathan. And there was a reason David brought us up here, not just the spectacular views and the complete solitude. It was a couple of really special endemics for the region. So Allium narcissiflorum is an allium. Obviously, lots of people have probably tried to go. It's tricky. It's not the easiest to keep going. I had it and lost it a few times in Alpine at Kew, and Beradia, which is another endemic to the region, another bizarre composite that is another one of these relictual floras, relictual elements of the flora kind of trapped in this scree. On the way up, not quite so extreme in their ecological preferences. The Aquilegia of the region, Aquilegia bertolonii, Scutellaria alpina, the alpine skullcap, and Campanula elpestris, which always looks like a trumpet gentian at first glance, poking out from around the screen. Now, if anybody has tried to grow these two ever, this is why they're hard to grow. They're on a 45 to maybe 60-degree slope of pure scree, and the amphitheatre pictures that we took earlier, you've got to scramble a fair way up there to get them. Luckily, we had few members of the group that formed a sort of forward recon party. They seemed to enjoy getting up there quickly and could sniff them out. Beradia, if you ever do get seeds of it and try and grow it, really low viability is what happens in lots of compositae, and you can't damage the taproot. You have to allow the taproot to germinate and settle, a little bit like giant echiums or anything else. I believe it's monocarpic, so it'll die after flowering. Correct me if I'm wrong, David. But yeah, two plants that I had never seen that I was super excited to see. A really, really nice reward. On the way back down, the obligatory Lilium martagon shot, and I hope you all appreciate Talitha's commitment here, lying in the fairly poisonous veratrum, only if you eat it, to get the shot. But I mentioned iconic plants of the Alps in the trumpet gentians and the edelweiss. I think Lilium martagon is definitely got to be up there as well. Almost looks kind of too exotic for Europe. Then I'll hand back to David for the emotional peak of the tour.
Yeah, so this was one of the hotly anticipated aspects of the tour. We were going to drive up to the Gordlask Valley, and then we were going to trek about 6 kilometers up to the Refuge de Nice, which is perched at about 2,300 meters. Spend the night there, and then descend via a different valley in order just to get a real immersion in the plants of the Mercantor. The Mercantor National Park is it's a granite massif, which is the northern border of the department. You can see a bit of that massif there. This is us halfway up the valley, crossing over the Gordlask River. Everybody smiles. And then looking back over, a few fantastic points where the river cascades down these granite cliffs. Talita again finding something interesting. She was top scout, I think, during the week. And this, sunny though it may have seemed lower down in the valley, the old adage that the weather changes quickly was borne out.
So when we tested this before, the sound wouldn't work. So we're going to assume that the sound's not going to work for you here. I will talk over it, but so I apologise if they clash. I think actually I can switch sound off there, and that will work. So this is trying to find. There it is, Saxifrage florulenta, and the heavens. When you say the heavens, anybody that's been in the mountains, it's not little rain. It's kind of fat rain, and you keep saying, "Clear up in a minute." It's blowing over. It's blowing through. It did not blow through. It blew very much in, and then very much stayed there for the rest of the day. So we were about halfway up. Just about as we found the first plants of Sax florulenta, the heavens opened. And one thing we learned is David's an incredible tour guide, but his it's just over there, slightly longer scale than mine. So the refuge is just over there. It's just over the hill. Or whatever. It was a little bit further. Maybe it was motivational. I don't know. But yes, we got thoroughly soaked. There's a picture of me looking into the abyss there, I think. Emily chose to embrace it thoroughly. Talitha was hiding in a cave. But when we got up to the refuge, there's nothing like getting looked after and having a hot 3-course meal, French cooking in the refuge, right, David?
Yeah, I'm playing banana ground. You may see at bottom right there in the check shirt, someone who people may know, Ollie Cheney of the Alpine Garden Society. As I say, the heavens had opened, the sky was black, we were all shivering in the refuge, and the door bursts open, and there is Ollie striding in, shaking the wet off him, demanding where we've been, what we've seen, and when we can leave to go and look at it again. So he was fantastic shot of adrenaline in the arm for everybody at this point of the tour. And here we are, spirits lifted. We didn't know if it was the altitude or the beer, but people were very happy to be at the top of the mountain. As Tom said, we got well looked after at the refuge. And set off the following day to explore the high peaks.
Ollie, always on job, always talking shop. So we were in the refuge and we said, "So where's the drying room?" What's the drying room? So we're all wet socked at this point as well. And I have to say the resilience and the spirit in the group was really amazing. There was zero moans. There was loads of fun. Everybody just got on with it. Even with Ollie sticking a tripod and a microphone in their face to scrape content for AGS digital channels, and we were rewarded with a glorious day. The day after, I think that's one of the shots of the trip. When I see that, I'm filled with happiness and want to go back. On the way up and on the way down, we saw some incredible plants, and David's concern about timing it right, I think it was the right thing to do to focus on the higher altitude stuff. We were peak flowering season for many things. Aconitum napellus, some local botanists have this now down as Bernatii, after Emile Bernat, the famous alpine botanist, but I think that is a subspecies, or used to be a subspecies of napellus. I've misspelt digitalis grandiflora there, rather than glandiflora. The eagle-eyed amongst you will spot. It is grandiflora doesn't always fit, but it's a hell of a sight. Digitalis grandiflora en masse, and then the spiked rampion or spiked campania, spiked bellflower, lots on the way up. An orchid appreciation post. So Dactylorhiza viride was probably the most common we saw. This used to be Coeloglossum frog orchid. Anybody that hasn't seen that before, if you squint, look really, really carefully. The one on the left there, it does look a little bit like a frog, part of this anthropomorphic group of orchids. The small white orchid, which is the one in the middle, which it's very good. I like it when vernacular names make sense. It's small and it's white. It's not a lot more to say about it than that's probably one of the least showy orchids ever, but it's a nice find. Gymnadenia corneliana in the top. So this group used to be called Nigritella. It's been lumped in with the Gymnadenia, which is the fragrant orchids, which I'm not sure about, but it's those very, very diminutive little, they almost look like clovers when you first see them, and then you realize it's a field of orchids, which is always nice to come across. Incredibly variable in color. They can go to almost black, to almost white, and then variations and gradients in between. And then I won't even hazard a guess at which Dactylorhiza we found. It was a big purple one, but the flowers were a bit gone over, and it made it onto the orchid appreciation post all the same. Pinguicula reichenbachii, the local butterwort there, that was everywhere and in full flower. I've included a question mark on the Gentiana verna there. There's verna, there's Brachyphylla and Rostanii there in terms of the verna types, but you need the leaves, and unfortunately I didn't photograph the leaves on that one. It's a nice picture all the same. Viola argentera, which is the a local endemic to it's the Argentera Massif is the Italian side. Is that right, David?
No, the Argentera is the highest peak in the Mercantor Massif, so it gives its name to quite a few of the endemics that are found there.
Got it. And then Ligustica, so that is of Liguria, right? It's a hint of its Italian persuasions. Thank you, David. I don't think it was Orchis mascula, but thank you anyway. Bellidiastrum michelii is the ubiquitous daisy that we find there. Right down at the end, tired legs, we were greeted with a big show of Lilium bulbiferum at the bottom. There's a very nice sneezewort. It's the endemic to that region, Achillea herba rota. We did find Erytricium nanum up there, though not in huge flower, and very, very long flowering stalks, which I'd not seen before. I've seen that in the American Erytriciums, but all the ones I've seen in Europe don't have the long pedicel like that, which was interesting. Aster alpinus, and then wonderful Astrantia minor on the way up in the Gordelasque Valley. It's always very, very photogenic. Some of the high altitude plants we found. Chirleria cedoides was everywhere in full flower. Saxifraga pedimontana is local to that region. Mostly gone over, but at the higher reaches we did find some. And then that was the best Primula latifolia we found on the whole trip. Just out of shot here is Ollie Cheney going bright red with joy as he's trying to get another picture from another angle of this one. And then last but by no means least, we managed to time it perfectly with a mast year for Saxifraga florulenta. After all, we saw so many flowering rosettes, and what was really, really nice to see was that there were, as you can see on the right here, many, many young rosettes. So it looked like the populations were functional. The prognosis for this species was not good. Farah is actually, you can see him in one passage writing about how he fears this is going to go extinct through unscrupulous collection. And then on the next page, talking about how he's loading up bags and bags and bags on donkeys to bring it back because he simply must have it to sell it. So somewhat double standards for Mr. Farrer, but happy to report AGS in 2025 confirmed it's doing well. There's no threats there. They're really it's protected and it looks functional. Lots of flowering, lots of young plants.
And sorry, Tom, if I can jump in, I'll just say a quick word. One of our participants, Talita Slabbert, has written a fantastic article for the journal. Has that been published yet, Tom?
Next issue. Next issue.
So keep an eye out for that. That we don't have time now, but there's so much to tell you about this plant and the rarity of the flowering. We saw a phenomenal number in flower. I know botanists who have visited the Mercantour for years who have never seen any in flower, and we had dozens of them. So we were incredibly lucky. But if anyone wants any more information, please read the Talita's article in the next journal.
Fab. And then we wind down towards the end.
And very, very quickly, I'd really put them through the ringer. And the last day, again, baking hot, but we have one of the natural wonders of France on our doorstep, the Gorge de Verdon. It also has its floristic interest. This is us coming into the gorge. You can't really get the scale of it. I mean, it's awe-inspiring. You walk through old tunnels, rail tunnels, which have been cut through the rock, and you emerge into these sort of windows and galleries which look up at hundreds of meters of cliff rising above you. Oh, and a quick word, bottom left, again, spot the botanists doing anything but botanizing as they frolic in the river and try and cool off on another baking day.
The Grand Canyon of Europe, as it's been known, right? It was time for one more endemic, the Asplenium. Is it endemic, David? Asplenium jahandisii.
Yeah, you find it. You find it in our department. You find it just over the border in the Var, in another gorge. Otherwise, nowhere else.
And then a familiar garden favourite to finish off, Echinops sphaerocephalon. It was an incredible woody flora around there. So Catinus, Cogigria, Acer opulus, Buxus and Pavirans should grow there, but is being annihilated by the moth there as well, which is worrying. Even the regrowth is being recolonized. But yeah, very, very heat, thermophilic woodland there in the gorge. Wonderful place to finish off. And then back to the garden. So the garden.
On the very last day, we were really delighted to invite everyone to our garden and nursery and show them some of the native flora that we've been growing. We collect everything from wild source seed. We have a national derogation to collect protected species, and we grow them in our nursery, essentially just to plant in our own garden, which is a real privilege. So that's the group having a tour.
And you can see David and Beth's son Frank and daughter Fern in the middle shot there. Frank is a genius on many levels, but he was pushing broad beans in tiny terracotta pots with the JBAM logo in little bits of paper on all the participants here, and then insisting that they went home and sowed them.
He is fundraising manager for the
fundraising manager, marketing and commercial enterprise.
A few more shots. They're walking through top right, our Garrick zone, and the bottom right is an ethnobotanic garden that we've made with all of the useful plants, not all of the plants, but many plants which are useful, organized by use.
And then some very weary but very happy into Centre of Grelier for a pizza, which is not very French, but it was very welcome. And I think just to finish off, not plant related at all, but if you can find yourself somebody who looks at you like Taka the dog, looks at that pizza, I think you will have done well. Thank you so much for listening to us talk about this today. This is something that we put our heart and souls into. the participants were amazing. We were really enthused about maybe doing it again. If any of you on the call today are interested in doing this, if you could express interest to Ollie, AGS social media manager, and many other jobs. So his email address is down at the bottom there. We just need to mention that the way we were able to do this cost effective is the East Surrey group of the Alpine Garden Society, the Hendry bequest that they manage, gave us a really generous donation, and it covered pretty much all the in-country costs for the participants. So the participants funded their travel and they funded their insurance, but we were then able to cover the costs in-country, and that's something that we because it hits our charitable objectives, it's something we should be able to keep going. We had Chatsworth, Kew, Chelsea Physic Garden, Benton End, Great Dixter, and Middleton House all represented in terms of the professional gardening groups. Will there is one of our students at Kew, very happy that he's found the saxifraga. And we'd love to take any questions. Thanks so much for listening.
Thank you.
So there are two in the chat. Dactylizer ID tips. So Ollie, I can send that image to you, and we can send it to our aficionados in the chat and see if they can get an ID on it.
Okay, great.
Naomi.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Can hear you okay, yes.
Great. Yeah, thanks so much, David and Tom. That was really interesting and lovely to see all of the plants that you found. Some really exciting and beautiful plants there. So it looks like it was probably quite hard work some of the time, but worth it. So yeah, thanks so much for sharing. Yeah, it was just a question for David. I was just wondering a bit more about the garden that you have there and what kind of plants that are you growing any plants from the region there that you're looking at reintroducing, or is it yeah, I was just kind of intrigued about the project there.
I wouldn't say we're at that point yet. I'll very quickly give you a little bit of background. So we came over and we started exploring the region, and we hadn't initially had the idea for the project, but it was just sort of mouth-watering trip after mouth-watering trip, seeing this exceptional, incredible diversity, and we were looking for a garden which potentially could represent it. And despite its reputation as a bit of a horticultural hotspot, largely the renowned gardens in this area are very coastal, and they're very much focused around exotics or a rather limited Mediterranean palette of plants, which doesn't really express the full range of what's on offer here. So we received some funding from the European Union, its leader program, in order to set up the garden site. We found a site thanks to our local Mary, who have quite a lot of control in their particular commune. They rented us a 2-hectare site. We developed the nursery, and then we started doing collecting trips in conjunction with some of the botanical organizations over here, building up our own collection. But really, rather than looking for the most special, the most garden worthy, the most showy plants, our approach with the project has been to try and represent the plant communities and to really put plants in their context. So a lot of the plants which are ordinary, are common, or the sort of standards that you see, are very interesting to us, because these, in the rightly curated combinations, can really give you an accurate picture of the communities that you're going to find around the department. So we've broken the garden down into 5 or 6 different areas, and then we found the really the characteristic plant communities that represent those regions. For example, rocky areas, garrigue, deciduous woodland, fomophile, evergreen woodland. And then within there, as I say, we've got the common plants, and we've also had been fortunate enough to get the derogation to collect protected plants. So we've got some of the rare plants, and via the garden we can share their stories. We can alert people to the uniqueness of the flora that's on their doorstep. So there's not, just to go back to your question, Naomi, we haven't really purposes beyond getting the garden established and the nursery established at this point. And we're still very much a work in progress. Anyone that's interested, we've got a website. It's GBAM, G being a J, because we're French, so it's JBAM.fr, and there's more information there for anyone that would like to find out more.
Amazing, David. Thank you so much. That sounds fantastic. It sounds like you're doing great work over there. And I think also this sort of tour being led by someone like yourself and collaborators, I think makes a huge difference. Somebody that knows the region and is working with some of the plants there. So yeah, it sounds fantastic. Thanks so much for sharing some more details.
My pleasure.
Couple of comments from the chat. Peter Colony said, great stuff. Keep doing these tours with at least 7 exclamation marks, which is great endorsement. I think fantastic plants, amazing scenery. Thank you both and everyone so much. Keep going. Thank you, Judith. We will try. I think, any small enthusiast society, charity, or whatever, things have been tough over the last few years. Brexit's been tough on plant societies in the UK. COVID was really tough, but I see the green shoots of recovery now. Not to sound too much like a politician, but something like this, and the interest that was generated in it, and how good the participants were, and the spin out articles that have come from it and things like that, gives me a lot of hope for the future.
And it would be wonderful if this does pick up some momentum and becomes an annual thing. We were really just scraping the surface of what the area has to offer. There's within the department, we've got the highest road in Europe, the Col de la Bonnette. We didn't even go near there. We've got the Roya Valley, which is a phenomenal centre of endemism, rare plant after rare plant. Ollie, I think you visited there, haven't you? The Roya. It's really worth a visit. We've got the Margaret, which straddles us and Italy, which is an alpine karst environment, a completely different flora all over again. So, despite jamming in as much as we could, there's so many more options that we could explore with this. So it'd be great if anyone is interested to contact Ollie, and we'd all love to hear from you.
David, one of our participants has just outed themselves in the chat.
I wondered if anyone was hiding in the background. I want to give a special mention to Julia. Julia wrote me a wonderful letter recently about the tour, and I haven't replied yet. I'm very sorry, Julia, but she was the most spirited, enthusiastic, and I can't think of other adjectives for her. She was wonderful. It was lovely having Julia along throughout the tour. She was really looking forward to finding the Lilium bulboferum, so we were delighted to give her that one on the way down from the Mercantor. And I hope the legs have recovered, Julia.
Yeah, head gardener at Middleton House, I believe. We won't doorstep you and make you speak, Julia, but it was so great to have you along. One more question in the chat. Is the last saxifrage showed able to be grown in GB? Great question. Right, Ruth. So I assume, Ruth, you're talking about Sax florulenta. Sorry, I hate it when people do this.
Yes, it is. It is that one.
Yeah. Okay, so.
I mean, look at it.
This is and you'll look out for, so this captured the hearts of so many that our very own Ollie Cheney, I think, has pumped an article out about his personal relationship with this plant for the current AGS journal, and then Talitha has written one for the next one, different in tone, and T looked into the history of the taxonomy and the conservation. It appears to have been saved from extinction by its intractability in cultivation, which is wild. Like, it's a wild irony on the good way. So it was being collected to extinction at the beginning of the century, because look at it. If you're going to grow any saxifrages, yeah, incredible, right? But it barely makes offsets, so you rarely ever see a plant with more than one rosette per plant. So obligate seed, it's monocarpic, and Q have had it 3 times. Failed to germinate every time. We've got 1 accession in the seed bank at the minute, 0 viability. Any horticultural records you see of it, didn't germinate. So even the main way of getting it into cultivation was by moving rosettes. So you had to go collect the plants. But even if you got it to flower, even if you coaxed it into flower, you can see where it's growing, right? And that's why you can say it's got no threats, because it's often on these undercrofts, on these overhangs where the chamois can't nibble it or anything like that. Very, very difficult to replicate those conditions. I imagine it's got a big taproot as well. So even if you get it to flower in cultivation, you probably need another one of a different genotype in flower to make good seed from it. And then I think the seed is probably incredibly short-lived. And it fell out of favor. So nobody wanted to grow it anymore because you couldn't. And that's probably what saved it from extinction, which I find amazing. A real good news story. Like, the failure of horticulturists is kind of biology's game. So yeah, great question, Ruth.
Also, if you're lucky enough to get it to germinate, it can take 20-25 years plus to reach flowering age.
Well, I would have picked the bucket by then.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Plenty of other ones. This one, I mean, it's a selling point for the tour, actually. David's obviously got the knack of getting there at the right time, and know where they are. But I think there's something quite nice about that, right? In that you can only go and see it where it wants to be seen. I think we'll stick to other things. It's quite happy where it is. Naomi, is that an old hand?
No, it's a new hand. Yeah, sorry, it was just another quick plant question. Maybe for you, Tom. You mentioned about the Edelweiss and it being an unusual form of Asteraceae because it has the composite flowers.
Yeah.
And the fact that that's possibly an alpine adaptation. That's really interesting. I was just wondering what the advantage of that is for alpine plants. Is it just because they're more compact and so it's basically just maximizing the sort of surface area of the reproductive parts of the flower? Or
this is the problem with plants, is that you can't ask them why, right? I suppose you can't ask animals. You can ask them why. I suppose animals, you can't get an answer that you can understand either. All you can do is see the trends. So there was a paper written. There was a big project actually on studying alpine Asteraceae about 6-7 years ago at Kew, and this was one of the things that they looked into. The theories were, so like, why do you have a composite flower anyway? It is the theory is it's more efficient pollination. So any composite flower is more efficient pollination. You can get more ovaries fertilized in a single visit than you can if you're think of a magnolia or a water lily or something like that, some of the basal things. And then I guess a composite is just the kind of the next upgrade from that, and disproportionately represented at alpine elevations. And the hypothesis there was alpine environments are high stress in environments, and often experience severe disturbance, whether it's a landslip or whatever. The theory was, do you need alpine elevations? Do you need an accelerated rate of evolution in order to try and develop as many advantageous mutations as possible in order to survive this constantly shifting, very stressful climate? So yeah, all you can say is that there's a trend, and then you can kind of hypothesize as to why.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Well, I'll definitely check that out. That sounds interesting. I suppose it makes me think as well about the pollinator interactions, and the fact because I was wondering perhaps whether it was also, if the plants are quite sparse in the landscape, and maybe that they are sort of adapted for that, in terms of, if an insect visits a plant, it might have journeyed quite a long way to get there, so the plant kind of has to be a little bit different maybe. But yeah, interesting. Thank you.
No worries. Just jumping, sorry, quickly. I don't know if you can necessarily draw a parallel between the Edelweiss and the Saxifraga that we were just looking at, but I think the pollinization factor is certainly a big one. The Saxifraga florulenta, you might have noticed in those pictures, it sends up its inflorescence. It's got one little flower open at the top, which is sort of the starting pistil, and then it will flower from the bottom of the inflorescence up to the top. But once it's done this, it isn't done. Once the flowers at the top have opened, a second wave of flowering starts from the bottom again, all the way to the top. And there can even be a third one as well. So these plants have waited so long to flower, they're going to get pollinated, whether the bee likes it or not. The plant is going to keep on flowering to give itself the best possible opportunity of a pollinator visiting the plant. And I don't know if the Edelweiss is a similar thing with the staggered flowering as well. But certainly, yeah, high stress and a limited number of pollinators. So these plants want to give themselves the best possible opportunity.
Cool. Thanks for that.
Okay, great. Guys, thanks very much for that fantastic talk. Everyone, please, if you are interested in doing this tour, do get in contact, because obviously the more, if you give us some enthusiasm, we'll get it sorted and get it on. But we'd love to do it again. We are actually doing, the AGS is doing a tour to the Maritime Alps in the Royal Valley around Baston-Tond at the other end of the season, so in early spring, in May next year. So if anyone is interested in visiting this area, please, again, do have a look at the tour section of our website. Tom and David, thanks very much.
Thanks for having us, Ollie.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks everyone for watching, and see you all soon.
Cheers. Bye-bye. Take care.
Thanks.